if I can't get 2 minutes and more out of these subjects with Hoiles and Hoskins, then I need to reconsider this appointment, I think. Although the producer has just said the dangerous words, you don't have to rush. She's going to regret that, isn't she?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, right, here we go then. The missed tests.
Yep.
It was Oisin Murphy on Monday, didn't arrive at Kempton Park when he was supposed to be there, and he was also slated to take a breath test. And then there was at least 3 riders, one of whom was Jim Crowley, who didn't show at Wolverhampton when they were also slated to do random breath tests, Richard. Now, clearly, this debate has raged and blown up, and we've dealt with it quite extensively earlier in the week. Have you got any fresh perspective for me on this? Yeah,
I don't want to rehash what was already said on various things. Clearly, the wording might need looking at from the BHA because it made it seem, pretty specific that someone had avoided a test, I think, by the way that it was worded, which was what was picked up on the Racing Post. And clearly, there are 2 completely different
dynamics. And that can only be conjecture, can't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the point, is that you don't know the circumstance. If it comes out that somebody was tipped off, that the testers were there and their name was on the sheet, and they felt they might fail it, and they failed to turn up, then clearly that is a major breach of protocol.
And that will be investigated by the BHA as well.
But I also know my family took 7 hours to get to Liverpool going past Wolverhampton on Friday, so I know the traffic was hopeless. So what I'd prefer to deal with is some of the things that have been suggested afterwards, which was, why don't they turn up halfway through racing? Well, I think it's really important to suggest that the point of these protocols are A, to catch habitual offenders, but B, they're to prevent anyone riding under the influence. And if you rock up in race 3 and you test someone who rode in race 1 and 2 and they were over, then you've failed in a major way, given the Freddie Taliski, Graham Gibbons thing. The idea of this is to act as a deterrent. Yeah. And if you were someone who turned round because you were tipped off by someone who you felt you might fail, it might act as a massive wake-up call that you should never, ever take that risk again. However, if you are someone who struggles with alcohol, then it becomes a different matter. But those 2 things don't always sit side by side. So to suggest, we should just jump on everyone halfway through a card. Well, lots of jockeys don't have rides in the first anyway, but it does miss the point slightly if this is prevention for those people who might have just taken a chance.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Oisin Murphy case, obviously, is that he has served a lengthy ban before, ended up serving about a year of it, not just for 2 failed tests, but also for misleading BHA officials. So there's going to be that bit more scrutiny on him. What I wasn't able to establish, I was able to establish quite a lot from the BHA, Sam, including that he is tested more regularly and in a number of different ways, but not how much, and not how much relative to how much he was being tested before. So I guess the investigation just has to play out now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard from someone on the outsider. It's one word against the other, but it's obviously absolutely crucial for participant and welfare to make sure that this is fair and everyone knows where they are and the rules aren't being breached.
Fundamentally, if you're riding against someone day to day at 35 to 40 miles an hour and you've got the problem, which was insinuated in some circumstances with the Freddie Taliski case, it is also the responsibility of the weighing room to be responsible in flagging that up for the benefit of the individual as well. They'll know far more as to what the list of names who may or may not be stuck in traffic and may or may not be tipped off. It's very, very difficult for us outside to be aware.
Let's talk about Premierisation, which appears on this list far too often. Ripon decided to eschew Premier status, yet still yesterday for the William Hill Greats and Wilfred and the chief supporting race. They got main channel ITV coverage. So when is Premierisation not Premierisation, Sam Hoskins?
Well, I mean, obviously it was a shame to see them not behind it. I think it was 35 grand would have cost them extra to make it up. But I mean, obviously it's probably shows a flaw in the system if there's not enough, if they're not deemed to be getting enough benefits.
There's no incentive for them to put extra prize money in.
Exactly, and I respected his honesty, James Hutchinson's honesty for that. And look, it was a very well-funded card. But the problem is that the whole point of this is to have that bar where they have to get there and to incentivise them to get there. There needs to be enough rewards for them to say, look, OK, we're going to get more in push from ITV and from the racing channels and from getting more people going racing. So they're justified. Look, yeah, we should do this, guys, and we should give this a go. And that's the thing. This is the first year of it, and if they're not giving it a go, then that's a shame. And but there've been other cards that have been let through who, I said, I think Ripon is a very well-funded card. The other cards somehow have snuck through the net who are racing. I mean, the other day there was a meeting up at Newcastle that had at 2 o'clock had a 0 to 65 worth £5,700 going off. I mean, how does that allow? That's pulling the system down.
There's just too many holes being blown in this for it to be sustainable.
The dilemma from a racecourse, if I'm a racecourse and I've got a cake this big for prize money, the question is, what benefit is it to me to take a bigger slice of that cake to make it a Premier meeting, as opposed to not making it a Premier meeting, but having that 35 grand I was shortfall from Ripon to supplement the other races during the year? And that's the trade-off as to when it becomes worth it. And obviously with the lack of marketing, and from ITV's perspective, to be honest, we provide the Premier coverage. We don't. It's not whether it's got a Premier flag or not. You will take the best races, and Ripon was by far and away the best second card.
Yeah. So they were fortunate in a sense that they sit in a week where there's not that much competition. And Newbury's Hungerford Stakes fixture is the feature fixture. Yeah. And everything's going on in Ireland or in Deauville or whatever. So you're like, well, what's the point? It's just put what we normally put on and we'll get on ITV.
And the whole point you meant to see increased in betting, hope from the bookmaker side, obviously we don't know, but we're hopefully seeing increased betting action on these meetings because of the fact that these races are being spread out further. That's the whole point of Premierisation, to keep the crown jewels far apart so people can analyse it, see you. I mean, on a Tuesday, you get sort of a 0 to 70 at Catterick will get will get lots of attention, but these meetings on Saturday, these heritage handicaps, they need the attention, the dynamic to sort of take an interest in.
That is the $64 million question about this project. Does the uplift, if there is any, in betting turnover by giving a race more focus outweigh the cost, if you like, of the extra investment, or are you just robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Well, you used that phrase. I was about to use exactly the same one about the larger racecourses, because the independents like Ripon, they've got no choice. They just have to work with what they work with. That's their money, and they've got to do with it what they they've got to cut their cloth accordingly. The bigger racecourse groups, Jockey Club and Arc, can artificially, if you like, manufacture Premier fixtures for some of their smaller courses by taking money from some of the more money-making courses. So they can move their money around and tailor it to their satisfaction.
Yeah, I think you had Craig on, didn't you? Right, from Plumpton.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of. That's a matter. It'd be very interesting to see how you go in year 3 for them, because it's a major investment for them, and it does leave some of their day-to-day meetings struggling for money, unless it's going to act as an increment. We don't know yet, because we don't know the returns.
It probably won't be the first time that the Aga Khan moving horses or terminating relationships with trainers or jockeys has appeared on this list. But it's happened again. The Aga Khan stables have taken horses away from Jean-Claude Rouget, 17 of them. They've come back to their home base in Chantilly to join Francis-Henri Graffard, who's having a very good season for His Highness the Aga Khan, with Calandigan and Rahir and others. And that marks the end of a really significant relationship with Jean-Claude Rouget, who's done very well for the stable. But of course, recently Jean-Claude Rouget merged with Jérôme Régnier, announced that he was going to merge with Jérôme Régnier next year. Jean-Claude Rouget himself is not in the best of health. It's probably not gone down that well, this move, but that's never something that's particularly worried this operation before when it comes to what people might think of what they do, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. I would declare an interest. I'm a very good friend of Jérôme Régnier, so I'm disappointed from his perspective they haven't given him the chance. But I suppose from their perspective, Jean-Claude Rouget was their trainer. In France, it's very hard being trainers. I believe employment law is such that if you are a yard that's either getting bigger or smaller, and the stable staff numbers, once you employ someone, you are effectively married to them. So you've got to be very careful when you're making moves up and down. I'm sure that must have something to do with the fact that while these two yards are merging together, and if Rouget, I'm very sad to sit, if he's obviously not very well, and actually the move together works for them both. But I suppose it wasn't the Aga Khan's decision to have Jérôme there. But I mean, he is an amazing young trainer, and he'd be such a good asset to their team. We mucked out enough stables together at the Irish National Stud 16 years ago or so, and I can tell you he's a bright spark.
Who was more of a grafter, you or Jérôme?
Well, definitely Jérôme. I've always had a slight chip on my shoulder though, because he won the pedigree prize. He's an absolutely amazing person when it comes to pedigrees, and he went on to get onto the Dali Flying Start, another Godolphin Flying Start course, and he's a top man, but he's done it the hard way. He started with a few low grade horses, and he's a grafter. And it's no surprise to me to see his success, and I hope he carries on. But in this situation, it's a different one. Owners pay the bills, and they've got to make their decision.
Yeah, and it's a decision they've made a few times before, but it normally works for them.
Yeah, look, you can well argue that if the rationalisation is of numbers, having them all in one base, you know, Francis Graffard, like Jérôme, has made a really good start, you know, and has proved capable of handling their horses with aplomb. And Jean-Claude Rouget, obviously beset by illness and merging in a direction which they had any say in, may well be the reason. The only thing I would say is I always feel, from an ownership point of view, interesting, you're sort of that, all eggs in one basket is a worry, isn't it? In terms of all yards. Every yard has a bug or has something that, you know, and if you're the owner and you're absolutely allied to that one yard, that's the only reason, from being an old accountant and diverse risk and spreading your portfolio, that's the only thing that worries me slightly, I think.
What do you make of Wathnan's new Qatar-based operation in Newmarket, the sort of Hamad Al-Jahani, another winner yesterday with a 210 grand breeze-up purchase. Fally Bugenheim now coming over to ride. There's lots of echoes of the early days of Godolphin here, aren't there?
Yes, because I was confronted by Fally Bugenheim's name on my card at Epsom, and I have to admit, when you go through, you think, oh my word, you know, I don't know anything about him. So I was Googling away, and obviously champion jockey or regular towards the top at Qatar, had won the Qatar Derby, etc. But yes, that got me thinking, Nick. We've had horses that have been purchased under Wathnan Racing. Originally, they were all left with those trainers. Now we have the setup of an operation under the name of a Qatari trainer, setting up a satellite yard, and now we have a Qatari rider as well. So yes, I think you made the chat when we were chatting outside about Ahmedjad Tebi and Said bin Sarur. There is shades of this, and it'll be interesting to see the dynamics of when someone comes calling for a Wathnan horse from a training point of view as to whether or not you in your head you're waving goodbye to it or not. At the moment you wouldn't have been, but maybe next week.
Well, the Striking Viking, of course, is the most prominent example of a horse who has moved down to Hamad's yard to really try and give that a boost, and is probably one of the likelier winners at Goodwood at York this week. Probably should have won at Goodwood.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. I mean, their record's fantastic. You can easily say you throw a load of money at something and get success, but that's not like that. Richard Brown and Ollie Tate have clearly managed them very well and had a lot of success, and fair play. It's yeah, money doesn't buy you success, and they've done very well. And look, in terms of bringing another, obviously bringing Qatar further into our sport, and bringing new personnel, and that's great. And I was watching Fally Bugenheim, and he looks a very tidy rider, and I hope he does well.
Yeah, he looked tidy at Epsom. To be fair, I was keeping half an eye out. Not the easiest track to make your debut on, after all, is it? You know, I couldn't see anything fundamentally wrong. It's just obviously lack of experience at those tracks. If you're going to ride them day to day, it'll take a while to acquire. Yeah,
he's ridden stacks of winners in Qatar. Let's talk about the subject that's probably created the most debate this week, and it was quite a strong field as well. These races that are proposed by Horse Racing Ireland in an attempt to diversify Irish jumps racing a little bit, and to make the small to medium-sized trainers' operations a bit more sustainable. So restricting 60 races during the calendar to trainers that have had fewer than 50 winners for each of the last 2 seasons. Now, at the moment, that would rule out Willie Mullins, Gordon Elliott, Gavin Cromwell, Henry de Bromhead. And those 4 trainers, it has been alleged, are likely to take HRI all the way with legal action to fight this. What do you think about this, Sam?
Well, I was going to say, if I could sit on the fence a little bit, but I would say restricted races are not uncommon in terms of restricting horses, restricting stallion, and obviously now in this country we've had restricted rider, which I think are quite a real success, I think, in terms of giving them a bit of time off. In terms of this scenario, well, I do believe it should be a free market, but at the same time, obviously, there's a serious situation in Ireland, and the bigger yards are getting bigger. I would say the bigger yards have an advantage because of economies of scale with everything, and we talking with people earlier about transport and stuff. You've got a bigger yard, you've got more economies of scale on transport. You've got a lot of advantages of a bigger yard, which in this time of high cost, they have their advantages in other ways. And we need to keep the little guys going. But that said, it should be a free market. I'm somewhere, I can see both sides of the argument, and I'd love to put my neck on the line.
You're not on this programme to see both sides of the argument, for goodness sake.
I have plenty of opinions, but this is a hard one.
It is quite tough, actually.
Yeah, I think you'd split it into 2. I mean, I think you made the salient point right at the beginning, is this is not new to racing in terms of, you know, quite often I'm researching number of apprentices who have ridden less than 50 winners, or to be in this series, or you mentioned, I'd forgotten actually, the nature of the Chesham, for example, which is restricted in terms of, so I think they're well within their rights to do this as a governing body. The question is when it becomes material, and I don't think at the moment it does. I have no issue with 60. I wonder if this has attracted so much attention from the bigger yards, they're firing a shot across the bow to say, you know, we're not happy about you doing this if it goes anywhere beyond this, and there'll be some agreement that there will never be more than X in the calendar, but that it will go through.
So you think there could be this could be just a bit of a bargaining process?
I think when you both sit down looking at court costs and what have you, I think there will be, they're basically saying, OK, but you can't do this for 120 or 150 in the future, so we'll make it difficult for you. There will be an agreement that 60 is fine, but there'll be no more.
Well, the Shark outlined that earlier this week, didn't he? Shark Khan, and he went, yeah, I think it's a great idea, 60, and then we could have some more.
Yeah. Well,
so that rather kind of gave rise to that. I did have some sympathy with the break between Mullins and Elliott, and then de Bromhead and Cromwell, because the gap between Cromwell and de Bromhead and Philip Rothwell and the rest is way smaller than the gap between Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott, and then, do you know what I mean? So it seemed a bit...
when you've got a horse in training and the trainer in Ireland's on 49 winners for the season and tries to dissuade you from running on December.
There is that as well, isn't there?
I know. I mean, so Mark Prescott for years used every loophole and such. She had a great mare called Misty Halo. She never won a race more than £1,500 because it would have removed her from what was then a whole tranche of races which she'd have been eligible for life. She won 21 races, including about 10 on the Isle of Man, and it was brilliant for Sir Mark to play the programme book. I quite like the programme book being more varied. So in a way, I feel I support it.
We see it. We see at the sales at the moment with all the restricted A, B, C's and D's. We know the bands they are, and so there is that idea that once you get to that bid to push you in from say a band D to a band C or a band C into a band B, it means something here. So it's a natural reason why someone might have 39, but they might not have 41.
Yeah, it was pointed out earlier in the week that maybe British trainers like Nicky Henderson and Paul Nicholls could go over and plunder these races because they hadn't trained the winners in Ireland, right? Now, so this was the vice versa of Wolverhampton and Ben Cohen, who, you know, hadn't ridden X many winners in England. Quickly, HRI representatives going back to the rule book and crossing that two words out. Yeah,
I feel that the restricted races have been a massive boost for
young riders.
No, just in terms of the actual maiden structure. In terms of dividing that into the ABCDs.
Oh,
I think it's been an unheralded success. In terms of field size, I think at a lower level gives people a chance, and it's exactly the same principle. Buy something cheap, give yourself a chance. Start out with a few horses, give yourself a chance.
And they've tried it in National Hunt as well, and obviously it hasn't sort of taken off as much. But the one thing I would say in National Hunt, perhaps there needs to be a closed loop. And in Ireland, or all the UK, there are perhaps more private purchases that are coming on from France and from the Irish point-to-point field. And of course, those, if they've been bought as a foal for 20 grand, but then they're sold privately for $250,000, they still qualify for those restricted. Yeah. And if they could close off that loophole, then restricted races might become. Maybe that could be a middle ground option to appease both parties.
Yes, I can see that's not really workable over jumps at the moment, is it, in that sense?
It's not just on sire focus like the flats.
No. Exactly. Now, this is for you, really.
Yes, I'm sitting on the fence.
Take it away. Syndicate finances. So, just to sum up, this week there has been significant disquiet because syndicate members who own more than 10% of a horse have to perform what are enhanced now anti-money laundering checks if that syndicate has an account with Weatherby's Bank. Now, not every syndicate is going to have an account with Weatherby's Bank, but it makes your administration of a syndicate that much easier if you do, rather than just having a straightforward BHA account and doing your banking with Barclays or NatWest or Lloyds or whoever. So how do Weatherby's, who is a bank and have to abide by, financial authority standards, and the BHA go about making your life as a syndicate manager and your members who have significant interest in horses easier?
It's a hard one. I would say we haven't faced it yet. If you're setting up new bank accounts, so if, for example, when we have a syndicate account, usually when a horse is sold, you say we have Kennet Valley Syndicates X. When that horse is sold, a new horse comes into Kennet Valley Syndicates X. So it's when you're getting a new one. We're going to face it in the autumn because we're racing on more older horses. So that's going to affect us then. Naturally, anything to make our life harder is not welcome. Weatherby's Bank are usually extremely helpful, I'd say. We've, over the years, extremely personable. You can speak to someone. They're so good in many ways. But I know a lot of my, say it's colleagues, but fellow syndicators, we're all, Dan Abraham of the RSA, etc., have faced this, and it's a really unwelcome thing. I actually have an email which I need to reply to about whether any of our syndicate members, it's not just me, have a share of over 10%, for example. And I sort of feel, on one hand, I thought, well, sorry, it's none of your business here. But on the other side, obviously, people want to know where things come from. But if you were to go and book a This is leisure money people are looking after. If you were to go and book a lovely round-the-world trip with a holiday, would they say, where have you got your money from? Or does...
No, the issue here is that it's a bank, isn't it? That you're using a bank. It's a registered bank.
Yep.
So therefore, and particularly, I think that the new government has brought in much more stringent anti-money laundering regulations. Yep. You'll find it if you're involved in renting a house, buying a house, anything to do with property at the moment, it's the same. So the sport's somehow got to get in there and try and make this process more straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know whether I don't know whether you when you're registering your syndicate, you put everyone down and you're able to list able to put something down as occupation. When someone joins, you say your occupation or something like that might be a way of saying, look, do you have to? Because otherwise, if people are going to suddenly be forced to do effective affordability checks, that's not going to happen, and that's going to put people off. People are going to say, well, sorry, it's not.
Yeah, is it an affordability check, or is it simply proof that your funds are coming from a registered UK bank account or whatever?
Yeah, sure, exactly. Oh, and obviously the whole thing of this is to stop money laundering and stuff like that, which is a very fair thing to look into. So
if everyone had to prove they had enough money to have a racehorse, we'd be absolutely up the creek.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
What do you think, Richard?
Well, look, again, I mean, you're saying, I think this is a wider issue. If you ask people if they were against money laundering, et cetera, everyone says yes. And then when you get to the actual nuts and bolts of people requiring to provide source of funds, sometimes it can feel intrusive. And that is the nature of the beast, I suppose. I think there's a wider issue about, you know, as you say, owing money within racing that is of greater concern, which is the ability to move horses without settling bills. But that still strikes me as being absolutely bizarre. I appreciate there might be some. I still appreciate there might be some dispute over the bill, but an ombudsman, just like they used to have in the holiday industry, I cannot understand how our owners are allowed to move from trainer A to trainer B, have a horse in training without settling trainer A.
My personal view of it, I do have a strong opinion on that, and I think. And some owners might disagree, but if they can't afford the cash flow, they shouldn't be involved with it. I think owners should pay all fixed costs and training fees up front a month before, and all variables and arrears. And I think it's really tough. These trainers, some of them actually, they probably got perfectly reasonable businesses, but the cash flow sinks them because people don't pay. And it's really interesting about Mark Johnson's interview in the Racing Post midweek, and saying when he became big enough after, was it Mr. Bailey's won, the Guineas or whatever, that actually he could suddenly then stand up to those bad payers. But the small guys probably think they don't want to offend their bad payer. If you own a big horse in the yard and you don't pay your bills, they don't really want to offend you because you might move your horse. Well, that's crazy. Yeah, that's mad. And the trainers have, unfortunately, it's really hard on the trainers. But if there was an industry move to sort of say, look, you should be a month, and obviously rebated if that horse goes out of training, or you get a credit to the next month if your horse is on box rest for the other half a month. That would be a better way of doing it.
I think that you point earlier about the viability of trainers' businesses. That to me is the single biggest help you can have, because I did 6 months in receiverships when I was in accounting. Lots of good businesses went into receivership. It was cash flow. Yeah, it was cash flow always. It wasn't the venture, often not the financing. It was cash flow, and I think that's a very, very easy win.
Let's talk about the Arc, because it's not that far away. And news this week, the Yutaka Take would take another ride in the Arc, this time for Joseph O'Brien on Al Riffa, because he's been bought share for his very loyal owner, Mr. Matsushima. You, and to a lesser extent me, have seen Yutaka Take ride around the world. You've probably witnessed, like me, the cult status in which he is held in Japan as being one of their great jockeys and great sportsmen. Sadly, Arc, Yutake Take, you only ever think of two words, don't you? One of them's white and the second one's muzzle, which was what, I don't know, how long ago? It's really harsh, that, isn't it? Well, of course, I mean, it's 30 years or whatever, 32 years. 1993, isn't it? 93, we're getting old, that's terrible. But yes, and it was a car crash of a race, but then lots of good jockeys have ridden car crashes of races, but it's always hung over his neck when he's come to Europe, let alone tried from an Arc. So this is to do with Al Riffa. Owner not only wants to win the Arc, but wants to, I don't know, with a white muzzle. Does he know what white muzzle is in Japanese? Is that part of the story for him, or is it just to give Yutake Take a victory in the race? I think that it's a mutual dream. Yeah, and that's fine. Dylan Brown McMonagle, but he hasn't always ridden that horse, and he's got a chance. This horse on it. Yeah, got a chance. Yeah. He was good last week in Germany. Yeah, well, the City of Troy line will be tested in the week as well. It will. Good for the World Pool having a Japanese rider in the race. More Japanese interest. Yeah, for British racing. I hadn't thought about that, but always thinking of the good of British racing. Those were this week's talking points.